Chapter 2. The Bells of Danger. Toll in Valinor. It had been 20 years since Frodo, Gandalf, Bilbo Baggins, Elrond, and Galadriel had departed from the Grey Havens. Leaving Middle-earth behind, they had sailed across the vast waters of Beligire, finally reaching the blessed shores of Aman, a land untouched by time itself. Yet, despite all the years that had passed, the weight within Frodo never lightened. Today, as he walked beneath the glowing domes of Valmar, surrounded by the eternal beauty of the land, he still felt the ghostly chains of the ring pressing on his shoulders. This was a land of peace, but peace did not mean freedom from the past for him. Walking under the shimmering domes of Valmar, within the sacred lands of the Undying Lands, Bilbo accompanied Frodo. The spirit of Valinor had granted Bilbo many more years of life, and now, though he had aged and was nearing the end of his days, he was still here. Under the pearly domes of Valmar, Bilbo had become an old man, his voice weak but still carrying the warmth of a once lively laugh. His great adventure and story had been written and completed long ago. But Frodo, he had never felt like his story was finished. "Ah, Frodo," Bilbo said, touching his back gently, "I sometimes think that one day I'll wake up and this whole place will have been just a long, vivid dream." Frodo smiled faintly. "And then you'll wake up and realize the real dreams were left behind in Middle-earth." Bilbo chuckled softly and shook his head. Back at Bag End, sitting by the fire, all of this seemed like some fairy tale, but now I'm here, and sometimes I'm not sure what's real anymore." They walked in silence, listening to the unique landscape and the tranquility of the waters flowing beneath the clear sky, feeling the soft breeze on their faces. The lush green meadows around them seemed to remind them of the Shire, step by step. They walked, pondering whether what they had lived through was a dream or reality. Valinor was not just a beauty to behold, but a peace to feel, a presence that seeped into the soul, lighting the breath, softening the steps. Here the air rippled with a golden hue, and the sky was a vast, deep blue, unmarred by storms or shadows, a peace that could not be tainted in this land. The two trees of Valinor no longer shone as they once had, but their memories were still etched into the earth. Hills were undulated with silver and emerald green meadows, and flowers bloomed in colors never seen in Middle-earth. Rivers ran as clear as crystal, and their melodies called even the most restless heart to calm. And yet, amidst all this beauty, Frodo still felt a weight upon his shoulders. It wasn't pain, at least not the kind of pain he had known in Middle-earth, but rather a memory, a shadow that still lingered at the edges of his soul. The ring had been destroyed. Sauron was no longer a threat, but the burden Frodo carried had never fully left him. Sometimes he would wake with a start from his sleep, feeling the weight of the chain at his throat, a mirage, a memory, but still real in its presence. On some nights his dreams would take him back to Mount Doom, and he would hear the whispers of the ring echo in his ears. And so he wrote. Pages upon pages, lines upon lines, he wrote about the road to Mordor, the stony, dark lands, and the unbearable weight the ring had placed upon his shoulders. He wrote every moment, every fear, every hope. But he felt the story was incomplete every time he set the pen down, for his heart was still in the Shire. Even under the immortal lights of Valinor, the longing in Frodo's heart did not fade. He still remembered the round door of Bag End, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the leaves dancing in the wind beneath the party tree. He remembered Merry and Pippin's joyful laughter, the warm conversations at the Green Dragon, and, most of all, he remembered Sam. He imagined him standing at the gate of his garden, hands on his hips, that familiar trusting smile on his face. Sam's eyes were always filled with the belief that everything would be right in the end. But the Shire felt even farther away than these immortal lands. Lost in these thoughts, Frodo continued to walk the paths of Valinor with the Eldar beside the dreamlike waters of Lorelin, under the silver shadows of Telperion's last buds. Peace had been granted to him. But peace was not as thrilling as the dream of returning home. Perhaps one day, he thought to himself. Yet, in the clarity of the undying lands, the tranquility began to blur with the news that had begun to arrive from the outside world. The Maiar, ancient spirits who once watched over Middle-earth and the shadows, had begun bringing disturbing and unsettling news from beyond the Great Sea. A dark entity, long buried in the depths of time and space, had begun to stir again. This was the sign of an evil thought to be vanquished. Slowly, word of this new darkness, it seemed they carried the winds of destruction and death with them. Their voices reached the sacred lands of Valinor, sending a tremor through the eternal peace of the universe. From the depths of the Great Sea, this news revealed that an ancient evil, once thought lost to the shadows of history, was starting to re-emerge. A dark force had begun to awaken in the forgotten corners of the earth, in the hidden folds of time. The echoes of old corruption and decay had seeped into the very heart of Valinor, stirring a tension deep within its tranquility. These were not mere rumors. In the news brought by the Maiar, there were undeniable signs. The darkened sky, the rolling seas, the murmurs rising from the depths of the earth, all of them were signals. An unstoppable darkness was reshaping itself, weaving its own plan. Each manifestation was different, yet they all shared a common thread of shadow. This was the echo of an ancient evil, long thought erased, reaching the deepest corners of Aman, a reflection of the corruption of old. The Valar could not ignore this grave warning. The golden gates of the holy city of Valmar rang once again, heralding the urgency of the situation. Mahanaxar, the Ring of Judgment, was where all the ancient beings would gather. As the bells of Valmar began to toll, their sound spread throughout Aman, rising from every corner of the sacred land. Each sound, each vibration, was a call, a signal that the time had come for the Ancient Ones to assemble. The meeting place was known, but this time everything was different. In Mahanaxar, those gathered would have to face the shadows of the past, darkness creeping from the forgotten corners of history. All future plans and creations now bore the herald of impending destruction. In the sacred land of Valinor, the lords of the sky and the sea, the rulers of the universe, were coming together once again to preserve the world's peace. But this time, it was not just past mistakes they would face, but the dark reflections of the future. The golden domes of Valmar illuminated the vast circle of Mahanaxar, casting a radiant glow upon the great hall. This was the sacred place where the greatest decisions of Arda were made, where the eternal will of the Valar was shaped. The ancient beings of Middle-earth, gathered under the rule of the Valar, had come together to deliberate on the new shadows threatening their future. Mahanaxar was a place beyond time, where the boundaries of reality blurred. Each Valar, carrying the light of their power and wisdom, gathered here in this holy arena. At the center of the gathering stood a massive platform of high pyramid-shaped stones. These stones shimmered with a light from beyond the ages, each symbolizing the power of a different element. The sky above was bathed in pure white light, unmarred by a single cloud, but this light danced like a shifting palette of colors, changing with every passing moment. A deep silence filled the vast space, a stillness where everything seemed alive. Yet no sound could be heard. A peace seemed to swallow the air. The Valar gathered here, the great beings, each standing in their corner, their mere presence marking them as beings from beyond the world. Manwë, the Lord of the Sky, sat serenely on one of the high stones, his eyes sweeping the expanse of the heavens. Around him, a gentle breeze stirred as if every particle of air moved at his will. Varda, the Queen of Light, was surrounded by stars reflected from the deep sky. She shone as brightly as a star, yet as calm as the ocean, and with each glance, everything around her seemed to fill with infinite light. Holy, the Lord of stones and metals, silently leaned against a large rock, shaping a small model with his hands. He possessed an infinite creative power, and each movement he made further shaped the very structure of the universe. All eyes were upon him, for with every shift, with every creation, the world itself seemed to tremble. At the center of the gathering, Mandos, the Lord of Death and Fate, dominated the air with a coldness and silence. The atmosphere around him rippled like the mournful melody of spirits. Lorien, the god of dreams and thoughts, always stood in a mysterious and soft aura. His mind wove every thought into a web, connecting the future and the past. Among all these exalted beings, however, Ulmo, the Lord of the Oceans, was often solitary. He preferred the vast loneliness of the sea. His voice resembled a melody lost in the wind, echoing only in the depths of the ocean. Each Valar, as the representative of another element, another force, stood independently but simultaneously as part of a whole. The ambiance of the space was not only visually captivating, but also deeply sensory. A silence that calmed the mind was mixed with a tension that weighed heavily, shaped the earth, sometimes transforming it into rock, sometimes merely molding it with thoughts. During these meetings, while discussing the universe's existential balance, time seemed to pause, and the weight of each decision felt as though it would resonate throughout eternity. The gatherings in Mahanaxar held great meaning, not just for the Valar, but also for their servants, the Maiar. As the mighty Valar made their greatest decisions, the Maiar stood in their service, attentively watching every word and action. An important aspect of these meetings was the presence of a special area for these great beings to observe. This area, designed like a massive amphitheater, lay just a step behind the heart of the gathering. The viewing area was constructed from high, slender stones, forming a large circular structure with steps leading up to it. On each step, towering and impressive stones sat, each bearing a symbol reflective of the Maiar's personality, placing them in locations fitting their role. This was a region reserved for those who watched the grandest decisions of the Valar, but it was for the eyes of the Maiar alone. Each Maiar sat upon these stones, silently watching one another like shadows, while also absorbing the Valar's words and decisions, reflecting on the delicate balance of the universe. A secret silence surrounded the amphitheater-like space. The stones, illuminated by blue and golden light, carried the echoes of each conversation like a reverberation from the depths of the earth. In the background, faintly, one could hear the distant hum of the ocean and the gentle whisper of the wind. The sound took shape only through the words of the Valar, spreading in a reverberation, for it was believed that every sound would reach distant corners of the universe. The Maiar, feeling the power of these conversations within themselves, carefully observed each space encircled by towering columns, the transitions between the stars in the sky and the depths of the shadowed ocean seemed to vanish with each passing moment. As the Maiar watched from this space, each of them was linked to a different element. Some were masters of the winds, others were followers of the powers controlling fire. Yet all the Maiar, united in their shared purpose, observed this sacred meeting with a single perspective, collaborating for the right course of the universe. In the land of immortality, there was the silence of death. After countless years, the gathering of such a meeting did not seem like a good omen. This time, it was different. This gathering held meaning not only for the balance of the world, but for the very roots of the universe, stretching to encompass time itself. Every decision would resonate like an echo, and every thought would ignite change. Manwë glanced around, rose from his throne, and slowly made his way toward the center of Mahanaxar, the Ring of Judgment. the Lord of the Skies, stood, lending weight to his words. His eyes seemed fixed on a place far beyond the limits of sight. "My brothers," he said, his voice echoing over the peaks of Valinor, "I did not wish to call such a gathering, but I see now we are not as safe as we thought." At that moment a low hum rippled through the air, and on the faces of the Valar the deep weight of anxiety and concern was palpably felt. According to the news brought by the Maiar from the outside world, the evil we thought vanquished was rising again in a way we never expected and beyond our predictions. Manwë's wise face turned troubled, and he chose his words carefully, realizing something was wrong. Ulmo, the Lord of the Seas, who could hear the whispers of darkness from the deepest depths of the ocean, nodded gravely. "My waters are whispering the same things to me, Manwë," he said. "The names of our old enemies are echoing once more. The waves tell me the stones beneath Middle-earth are trembling. The time of the great change is upon us." It wasn't just the waters. The stars sent the same dark warning. "The stars are speaking of it as well," said Varda, the Queen of Light, glancing at her surroundings. "The earth and stones also signal this darkness," Ollie added thoughtfully. Manwë listened to them all, then took a deep breath and lowered his head. "We are now certain that this resurrection exists," he said. A heavy silence filled the room, and a look of concern settled on the eyes of the Maiar. Familiar faces stood side by side, watching the extraordinary scene with deep anxiety. Frodo, Gandalf, Bilbo, Elrond, and Galadriel sat together in the amphitheater. Frodo's eyes held fear, while Gandalf and Elrond watched the growing unease with thoughtful gazes. "Is this possible, Lord of the Valar?" Gandalf asked, his voice ringing cold like a wind. "The ring was destroyed, the reign of evil has ended, Middle-earth has been cleansed." He stood, and as he did, his eyes briefly met Frodo's. In an instant, all eyes turned to him. Gandalf moved silently from the shadows. Mithrandir, once a leader in one of Middle-earth's greatest wars, now faced a new terror. It seemed the shadows could reach even in the land of peace, and an old fear began to stir within him. "We thought the same," Manwë said, his voice echoing like lightning in the sky. "Before we knew that the destroyed ring had a twin—" At that moment, a hum filled the air, and all of Mahanaxar fell into complete silence. Gandalf's face froze in shock, cold as ice. Frodo, for a moment, felt as though he had been struck in the head. The sharp pain of the Nazgul's blade, wound in his chest, flared again. In that instant, he felt himself mentally drifting away, as though he was back at Mount Doom, the hot breath of fear surrounding him. In a flash, he felt Sauron's eye staring directly at him, and his breath caught in his throat. As he leaned backward, Gandalf caught him. Frodo realized that his dark pain was merely an illusion, and a wave of relief washed over him. It was as if a nightmare had ended in his mind, but the fear inside him remained, still fresh. Manwë, standing motionless at the center of Mahanaxar, continued his words. In the silence, all eyes were focused on him. "Alatar," he began, his voice growing deeper with every word, echoing like a prophecy. "Like the other Istari wizards, was sent by the Valar to prevent Sauron's rise. Specifically, he and Pallando were tasked with traveling to the eastern regions of Middle-earth, Rhûn and Harad, to organize the peoples there against Sauron." He paused for a moment, watching the faces of the Valar, each one showing deep tension. Then, with
When
even more
Alatar went
determination,
east,
he saw the people's allegiance to Sauron's dark power. He believed saving them was only possible through his own methods. Instead of liberating them, he chose to rule, manipulate, and ultimately control them. Manwë's voice carried the weight of this decision, every word like a harbinger of doom. He paused once more. In the sacred land of Valinor, a deep silence fell, as if the world's weight rested on their shoulders. Manwë opened his eyes and continued. After the destruction of the ring, all communication with Alatar was severed. However, it seems a grave mistake was made. After acknowledging his loyalty to Sauron, Alatar began to learn the dark arts and rituals, and he learned a magic that should never have been, the magic to bend time. At that moment, the Valar stood frozen. A wave of terror spread through them as they sensed the beginning of a catastrophe. They knew that the power to bend time could shatter the universe's balance and open the gates to a dark age. The shared glance between Elrond and Gandalf revealed the magnitude of this disaster. In their eyes, there was an unsettling understanding. Neither of them could ignore how dangerous this magic truly was. Though Frodo did not fully understand the tense atmosphere around him, he could feel the heavy meaning of the words being spoken. Every word whispered about the beginning of a war, a world-shifting event. In that moment, he felt a void within him, struggling to make sense of what was happening. This was a catastrophe, and the echoes of this disaster had deeply touched each Valar present. Manwë, speaking with calm and composure, continued. The depth in his voice made the weight of every word palpable. "We hold dominion over all time," he said, each sentence further emphasizing the power within him. "Time, for the Valar, does not exist. It is not something to be ruled. And to combat the evils of each age, we send the Maiar. Here in this place, each of you is part of every age. This realm is beyond time. The people of Valinor house the sacred spirits of all time. However, beyond this, any movement outside the governance of time has been strictly forbidden." Manwë paused for a moment, focusing his gaze on the assembly. He chose his words carefully, as a leader burdened with guiding everyone who watched him. "Alatar, at the bidding of Sauron, has broken this law and ventured into the new world," he said, his tone hardening. "That is, to the far future of Middle-earth. He brought Sauron's offer to the dark sorcerers of the New World. An agreement was made between Sauron and the Dark Lord of this new world." The words of Manwë sent a ripple of deep thought through the crowd. The scale of the danger became ever more apparent. This was a force the people of Middle-earth could not comprehend. Only beings like the Valar, timeless and boundless in knowledge, could understand the depth of the impending change. The vast knowledge of the time that the Valar possessed now stood as the only thing capable of perceiving a devastating shift that others could not yet fathom. These words were a sign of catastrophe. This was not just a decision, it was an impact that would shake the balance of time and the universe. The Maiar's manipulation of time, reinforcing their bond with Sauron, marked a moment beyond the Valar's control. This awareness wrapped around them all, for the beings who could protect their own time now stood on the edge of a danger wrought by time travel. "A new ring was created," Manwë continued, his voice deepening. "This ring was imbued with a spell called the Hortkluk Curse, with a piece of each of their souls placed within it. And the Dark Lord of the New World, that is." Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Voldemort!" At that moment, all eyes turned toward the source of the voice. Standing with a snow-white beard and aged eyes, his head slightly, acknowledged him. "Yes, Mithrandir," he said. At that moment, Gandalf and Dumbledore locked eyes. For the first time, the Maiar of two worlds bore witness to each other's presence. This was the first true meeting between two powers that had long been separated by history. And this meeting carried a profound awareness that they would soon embark on a far more difficult mission together. The silence between them hinted at the gravity of the decision they were about to make, at the cusp of a great change. This encounter was just the beginning. The weight of the responsibility fate had placed upon them both was palpable on their shoulders. "Where is this ring, and how is it being protected?" Dumbledore asked. Manwë took a deep breath before answering. "The ring is hidden in the east, in Harad within the Alteran Kingdom. It is concealed in a well-protected cave. so it can only be opened with 3 keys. Everyone listened to Manwë intently, their focus unwavering. These 3 keys are hidden in the new world, Manwë continued, his voice growing heavier with each word. Then, both worlds are in danger, Dumbledore murmured. Manwë nodded slowly and continued, if the keys are not found and the ring is not destroyed, I fear we will face the greatest darkness of all time.